If you want to feel more connected to humanity and a little less alone, listen to Beautiful Anonymous. Each week, I take a phone call from one random anonymous human being. There's over 400 episodes in our back catalog. You get to feel connected to all these different people all over the world. Recent episodes include one where a lady survived a murder attempt by her own son. But then the week before that, we just talked about Star Trek. It can be anything. It's unpredictable. It's raw. It's real. Get Beautiful Anonymous wherever you listen to podcasts.
Hey everyone, I'm your host Peter Zablocki, and you're listening to History Shorts. I hope everyone's having a great day so far, and thank you for making this show a small part of that. If you'd like to help me out with a small gesture, please leave History Shorts a rating or a review, and click that subscribe button if you haven't already done so. For sources and books used as the basis for these episodes, how to advertise on a show, and other information such as a list of our upcoming guests on the conversation series, or a link to our Patreon account where you can find exclusive episodes not heard here, please visit www.historyshortspodcast.com. Today's episode is brought to you by the Podcast Republic, your ultimate podcast listening app. Discover and subscribe to thousands of podcasts from around the globe, all in one place. Download Podcast Republic now and take your podcast experience to the next level. Having said all of that, when Americans look back on Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the image that often comes to mind is one of the confident leader who reassured the nation through the Great Depression and guided it through the Second World War. The fireside chats, the New Deal programs, the steely resolve in his voice, all have contributed to his lasting reputation as one of the greatest and most influential presidents in United States history. Yet, in his own time, FDR was far from universally loved. In fact, behind the public admiration lay bitter political battles, fierce ideological divisions, and outright hostility from powerful factions. His presidency was a political storm, one in which Roosevelt navigated not only economic collapse and global conflict, but also the constant crossfire of domestic opposition. Here is the rest of that story.
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941,
it's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
When Roosevelt took office in 1933, the country was reeling from the economic devastation of the Great Depression. His New Deal sought to stabilize the economy through an unprecedented expansion of federal power, creating jobs, regulating industry, and introducing social safety nets. But even as these programs aimed to restore confidence, they provoked immediate criticism. From the right, business leaders and fiscal conservatives accused FDR of steering the country toward socialism. Organizations such as the American Liberty League, funded by DuPont executives and other wealthy industrialists, charged that Roosevelt's policies undermined free enterprise and threatened individual liberty. Former Democratic presidential candidate Al Smith, once a Roosevelt ally, joined their ranks, blasting the New Deal as a dangerous departure from American tradition. From the left, radicals argued that the New Deal did not go far enough. Figures like Huey Long, the populist senator from Louisiana, thundered that Roosevelt's programs were too timid in redistributing wealth. Long's Share Our Wealth movement proposed capping personal fortunes and guaranteeing every family a basic income, plans that made even the most progressive New Deal reforms seem very cautious. One of Roosevelt's most vocal and influential opponents came from the pulpit, Father Charles Coughlin, the so-called radio priest from Michigan. Initially a supporter of the New Deal, Coughlin praised FDR's early efforts to aid the poor and rein in Wall Street. But as the decade wore on, he turned sharply against the president, accusing him of betraying the common man in favor of bankers and political elites. Broadcasting to millions each week, Coughlin's sermons mixed economic populism with conspiracy theories, rallying against the Federal Reserve, Jewish financiers, and what he claimed was Roosevelt's subservience to international interests. His National Union for Social Justice became a political force in the mid-1930s, and his relentless on-air attacks, calling FDR Franklin double-crossing Roosevelt, helped fuel grassroots distrust of the administration. Though his influence waned by the end of the decade due to increasingly extremist rhetoric, Coughlin's opposition demonstrated the potent combination of mass media, religious authority, and populist anger in shaping political resistance to Roosevelt's presidency. By 1935, all of this opposition moved beyond rhetoric to the nation's highest court. The Supreme Court, dominated by conservative justices, struck down key pieces of New Deal legislation, including the National Industrial Recovery Act and the Agricultural Adjustment Act, ruling them unconstitutional. Roosevelt, convinced that judicial obstruction threatened his reform agenda, launched a bold but controversial proposal. The Judicial Procedures Reform Bill of 1937, better known as the Court Packing Plan. The idea was to add up to 6 new justices for every sitting justice over the age of 70, allowing FDR to appoint allies who would uphold his policies. The proposal sparked an immediate political firestorm. Even many Democrats balked at the idea, seeing it as an attack on the independence of the judiciary. Newspapers accused Roosevelt of seeking dictatorial powers. Ultimately, the plan failed in Congress, and although the court gradually shifted in his favor, the episode marked a turning point, damaging his political capital and deepening suspicions about his willingness to expand executive power. As the 1930s wore on, business leaders and conservative politicians mounted an increasingly coordinated campaign against Roosevelt's policies. They argued that high taxes, pro-union legislation, and an expanding federal bureaucracy stifled economic growth. In 1937, a sharp economic downturn, the so-called Roosevelt recession, seemed to confirm their warnings. Critics pounced, claiming New Deal interventions had prolonged the depression rather than cured it. Roosevelt, undeterred, doubled down on public spending, launching a new wave of programs. But the hostility remained. Conservative Democrats in the South, allied with Republicans, began forming what became known as the Conservative Coalition, a powerful bloc that would frustrate New Deal ambitions for years to come. As the clouds of war gathered over Europe, Roosevelt faced a different kind of opposition. In the late 1930s and early 1940s, the United States was deeply divided between isolationists who opposed involvement in foreign conflicts and interventionists who believed aiding allies like Britain was both a moral and a strategic necessity. Groups like the America First Committee, led by figures such as aviator Charles Lindbergh, warned that Roosevelt was dragging the nation toward war. They accused him of manipulating public opinion and undermining neutrality laws. When Roosevelt pushed through measures like the Land-Lease Act allowing the United States to supply arms to countries fighting the Axis powers, critics charged that he was overstepping constitutional bounds and committing the country to an undeclared war. Even after the attack on Pearl Harbor silenced most isolationist arguments, Roosevelt continued to face scrutiny over his handling of wartime powers, including the internment of Japanese Americans, a policy now widely condemned. Roosevelt's long tenure, he served 4 terms, the only U.S. president to do so, ensured that he accumulated personal as well as political enemies, many of whom grew increasingly resentful as his influence over national life deepened. Critics on both ends of the political spectrum accused him of fostering a cult of personality, pointing to his fireside chats, his carefully staged public appearances, and the omnipresence of his voice on the radio. To them, his mastery of mass communication was not a democratic innovation, but instead a manipulative tool designed to sway public opinion and stifle dissent. His patrician background, underscored by the grandeur of the Hyde Park estate and his lineage among America's social elite, was a constant point of attack for those who claimed he was merely an aristocrat play acting as a populist reformer. Newspapers hostile to his administration lampooned him as a hypocrite, someone who dined with the wealthy while professing to fight for the working class. Right-wing commentators and politicians branded him as a dangerous centralizer of power, likening his policies to creeping authoritarianism, while left-wing critics called him a half-measure reformer who had betrayed the more radical economic changes they believed the Great Depression required. His New Deal, hailed by supporters as visionary, was painted by opponents as either a socialist overreach or a shield for entrenched capitalism. Proof, in their view, that he was never truly on the side of the most marginalized. Even his disability, which he took great pains to minimize in the public eye, became fodder for whispered slights in private political circles, used to question his physical capacity to lead. Every innovation he embraced, from expanded executive authority to the new intimacy of radio politics, became a double-edged sword, admired by millions who loved him, but deeply resented by the powerful blocs who feared or despised him. By the time Roosevelt ran for his fourth term in 1944, which I should mention he never got to serve in because of his early death, opposition was entrenched. Republican challenger Thomas E. Dewey accused the administration of corruption, inefficiency, and overreach. Although Roosevelt won, the margin was narrower than in any of his previous elections, reflecting the tiredness among voters and perhaps fear of concentration of power in one man's hands. Roosevelt's death in April of 1945, just months into his fourth term, froze his public image in a moment of wartime leadership. In the decades that followed, the narrative of FDR as a unifying figure took hold. Yet the intensity of the opposition that he faced while in office is a reminder that even the most celebrated leaders are always deeply contested in their own time. His boldest reforms were forged in the crucible of political conflict. The arguments over the proper scope of government, the limits of executive power, and America's role in the world, debates that defined the opposition to FDR, remain alive to this day. Roosevelt may have been loved by millions, but he was equally loathed by millions more. His story is a reminder that greatness and controversy often walk hand in hand, and that a leader's true impact can only be measured in the clash between vision and resistance. Thanks for listening. This week on the Conversation Series, one of America's most influential filmmakers of all time, Mr. Ken Burns.
Life isn't tidy. It doesn't fit into the binary systems that are media culture, 1 and a 0, our political culture, red state, blue state. Stories are complicated. In fact, I have in my editing room a neon sign, lowercase cursive, that says it's complicated. Because filmmakers, when a scene is working, you don't want to touch it. But we touch it all the time. We mess with it. We destabilize it. We make it less perfect because we're more faithful to what's going on. And what's going on inevitably in human behavior is contradictory. George Washington is deeply flawed, rash, and makes terrible tactical decisions on the battlefield, one after another. And yet, without him, we don't have a country. He's the only person you can say that about. Without him, we do not have a country, period, full stop. So I want to know that. This is what we know about ourselves, about the people we love. And somehow we've decided that in our politics and in our views of history that it has to be one thing or the other. It's not looking for complications. They're always there.